Welcome to today's English learning session. Whether you're a beginner or looking to improve your skills, you're in the right place.
Trade wars. They're not a new phenomenon, but their impact is often misunderstood. When two countries engage in a trade war, they impose tariffs, taxes on each other's goods. But why do they do this? Let's take a closer look at one of the most discussed trade wars of recent times, the conflict between Canada and the United States.
The mechanics of a trade war. A trade war begins when two countries engage in a battle over trade, usually by imposing tariffs or taxes on each other's goods. The aim of such actions is often to protect a country's own industries or to address imbalances in trade. But in reality, these tariffs don't just affect government policies. They have far-reaching consequences on businesses, consumers, and even the global economy. The concept is simple. One country wants to sell its products to another, but the prices can often be influenced by what the government chooses to do. By imposing tariffs, a country effectively raises the price of the goods being imported. These higher costs are meant to discourage consumers from buying foreign goods and, in turn, encourage the purchase of domestic products. To fully understand the mechanics behind a trade war, it's crucial to break down the key terms that are often involved. Let's start with tariffs. A tariff is a tax that a government places on imports. When a country decides to impose a tariff, it raises the cost of the goods coming from abroad. The goal is to make these foreign goods more expensive than local products, making them less appealing to consumers. For example, if a country imports a specific type of car and the government places a 20% tariff on it, the price of that car in the domestic market increases. This could push consumers to buy cars manufactured locally instead of imported ones. Narrator. While the government collects the tariff as revenue, the real impact is on the businesses and consumers. Domestic manufacturers may benefit as their products become more competitive in the market due to the price increase of foreign goods. However, consumers may not be as happy. With tariffs raising prices, the cost of goods goes up, and consumers are forced to pay more for the same products. Think of it this way. The next time you go grocery shopping, a tariff could make imported foods, like exotic fruits or specialty products, more expensive. As a result, even though the goal of the tariff might be to protect domestic farmers, the overall burden falls on the consumer who has to pay higher prices. Limits on trade. Another common tactic used in trade wars is the imposition of quotas. While tariffs raise the price of goods, quotas restrict the quantity of goods that can be imported into a country. A quota places a limit on how much of a specific product can enter the market over a given period. Quotas are typically used to control the volume of foreign products that can enter a domestic market. For example, if a country is worried that too many foreign textiles are being imported and driving local producers out of business, it may impose a quota limiting the number of textiles allowed into the country. Once the quota is filled, no more imports of that product can come through, regardless of demand. Quotas have the effect of reducing competition from foreign producers. Local businesses in that industry may find themselves with less competition, and thus have the opportunity to raise prices. However, consumers lose out because they now have fewer options, and the prices of available products can increase due to limited supply. Financial support for local industries. Narrator. Another tool countries use in trade wars are subsidies. A subsidy is a financial grant from the government to domestic businesses to help them compete with foreign products. The aim of subsidies is to lower the cost of domestic goods, giving local businesses an edge over foreign competitors. It's essentially financial support designed to make local products cheaper and more attractive to consumers. For example, a government may offer subsidies to its agricultural sector making it more affordable for local farmers to produce goods. These farmers can then sell their products at a lower price, undercutting foreign competition. While this may be good for local businesses, it can lead to unfair advantages and distortions in the global market. Subsidies often spark criticism because they can lead to an uneven playing field. Countries that don't offer subsidies find themselves at a disadvantage, as their products are priced higher than those from subsidized industries. This creates tension and can fuel further trade disputes. Trade deficits. The balance of trade. Finally, one of the most debated aspects of trade wars is the concept of trade deficits. A trade deficit occurs when a country imports more goods than it exports, leading to an imbalance in trade. This is often viewed as a negative situation because the country is spending more money on foreign goods than it is earning from selling its. A trade deficit isn't inherently bad, but it can raise concerns about a country's long-term economic health. For instance, if a country is constantly running a trade deficit, it may struggle to maintain its currency value or face a reliance on borrowing. In a trade war, a country may try to rectify this imbalance by imposing tariffs or quotas to reduce the amount of foreign goods coming in, thereby encouraging people to buy domestically produced goods instead. The ripple effect. Impact on businesses and consumers. Ultimately, these trade tactics, tariffs, quotas, subsidies, and the attempt to balance trade deficits create a ripple effect that reaches businesses and consumers. While the goal of a trade war might be to protect a country's industries or address economic imbalances, the outcome is often more complicated. Domestic businesses may get some relief, but consumers face higher prices and fewer choices. In the end, the very industries that tariffs aim to protect might suffer as well, as global trade disruptions continue to affect supply chains and markets. Trade wars are not just about numbers, they impact people's daily lives. And understanding the mechanics behind tariffs, quotas, subsidies, and trade deficits is key to seeing the bigger picture. Historical context of trade wars. Trade wars have deep historical roots that stretch far back into the past, and while they often seem like a contemporary issue, they are as old as international trade itself. Throughout history, trade disputes have sparked conflicts that were not just about economics but also about power, culture, and military might. One of the earliest and most significant trade conflicts was the Opium Wars between Britain and China in the 19th century. At the time, Britain was struggling to maintain a balance in its trade with China. While the British were eager to import Chinese tea, silk, and porcelain, they found that the Chinese were not as interested in British goods, creating a trade imbalance. This was a key moment in the history of trade disputes, but it would soon escalate into something much more violent. In the early 1800s, Britain found a solution to its trade imbalance: opium. British traders began importing opium from British-controlled India into China, where it became widely consumed. The Chinese government, alarmed by the growing addiction problem among its citizens, attempted to stop the opium trade by imposing harsh penalties and confiscating the drug. This move led to significant tensions between the two nations and eventually, military conflict. The British, with their superior military power, fought the Chinese during the First Opium War. The result was a clear British victory. In 1842, China was forced to sign the Treaty of Nanking, which not only allowed Britain to continue its lucrative opium trade, but also granted Britain control of Hong Kong and established treaty ports where British merchants could freely trade. The Second Opium War, 1856-1860, followed soon after, triggered by further disputes between Britain and China over trade rights. This conflict further entrenched Western influence in China, leading to an era of what the Chinese called the century of humiliation. The Opium Wars left an indelible mark on China's national consciousness and demonstrated the lengths to which powerful nations would go to secure access to foreign markets. Moving into the 20th century, another pivotal moment in trade history occurred during the Great Depression, a period that saw not only an economic downturn, but also the rise of protectionist policies around the world. One of the most significant pieces of legislation that reflected this protectionism was the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act passed in 1930. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff was designed to protect American jobs by increasing tariffs on thousands of foreign goods. The hope was that by making imported goods more expensive, American consumers would be encouraged to buy domestic products, thereby supporting local businesses and reducing unemployment. At the time, the U.S. was reeling from the effects of the Great Depression, and trade wars seemed like a way to shield the economy. However, the results were not as expected. Rather than shielding the economy, the Smoot-Hawley tariff triggered a cascade of retaliatory tariffs from other countries. In total, more than 60 nations raised tariffs in response, and international trade shrank drastically. The protective tariffs meant that American farmers and manufacturers could no longer rely on overseas markets to sell their products, and consumers faced higher prices for goods. The tariffs' impact was devastating. It worsened the global depression, leading to more unemployment, economic hardship, and a prolonged period of stagnation. The Smoot-Hawley tariff became widely regarded as one of the key factors that deepened the Great Depression, highlighting the dangers of economic isolationism and protectionism. Historians point to Smoot-Hawley as a cautionary tale, an example of how tariffs and protectionist policies, intended to safeguard a nation's economy, can often lead to unintended consequences. It was a turning point in trade policy, marking the beginning of a new era, where countries began to understand the importance of international cooperation and the dangers of isolating themselves through restrictive trade barriers. After the devastation caused by Smoot-Hawley and other similar protectionist measures, the global community began to move toward a more cooperative approach to trade. In the aftermath of World War II, international institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, were created, and the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, GATT, was signed in 1947 to promote freer trade between countries. This marked the beginning of an era of international trade agreements aimed at reducing tariffs, improving economic cooperation, and preventing another global economic collapse. The Opium Wars and the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act are just two examples in the long history of trade conflicts that have shaped the modern world. From military conflict over drug trade to the collapse of international markets, these events show us how the actions of one country can ripple across the global economy. The legacy of these trade wars serves as both a warning and a lesson for today's policymakers. That trade, while a powerful tool for economic growth, must be managed carefully to avoid escalation and harm. The winners and losers of trade wars. Trade wars, while often portrayed as battles between countries, don't affect everyone equally. The impact ripples through the entire economy, touching the lives of workers, businesses, and consumers in very different ways. Some industries benefit, but others can be severely harmed. In the end, the winners and losers of a trade war depend on what goods are being taxed, which countries are involved, and how deeply each sector is connected to international markets. Let's begin with the winners of a trade war: domestic manufacturers. In many cases, when tariffs are imposed on foreign goods, domestic industries are protected from outside competition. This can be a boon for businesses that produce the same or similar goods. For example, consider a country that imposes heavy tariffs on imported vehicles. The domestic automobile industry, protected from foreign competition, may thrive, as consumers are more likely to purchase locally manufactured cars because the price of imported models has risen. A similar story can be told for industries like steel production. When tariffs are levied on imported steel, domestic producers find themselves in a more favorable position. They can increase their prices and still remain competitive, as foreign steel is now more expensive. These industries benefit from the protection of tariffs, and workers in these sectors may see job security and even higher wages as their employers experience greater demand for their products. Small businesses, too, can benefit from tariffs. For example, a local furniture maker may find that a tariff on imported furniture raises the price of goods from abroad, making their handcrafted products more appealing to consumers. As a result, the demand for domestic goods increases, and businesses like this can see an uptick in sales and profitability. However, not everyone benefits from tariffs. In fact, some sectors and consumers are hit hard by trade wars. The most immediate and visible losers are often the consumers, who bear the brunt of rising prices. When tariffs are imposed on imported goods, the cost of those goods rises, and businesses pass that increased cost on to consumers. A consumer who once paid $100 for a foreign-made product may now be forced to pay $120 or more, simply because the price of the product has gone up due to the tariff. Take, for example, a grocery store that imports fruit and vegetables from other countries. If tariffs are imposed on those imports, the cost of goods like bananas, grapes, or avocados may rise significantly. While local farmers may benefit, consumers who rely on affordable imported goods can find their grocery bills increasing. This can be especially problematic for lower-income households who may be more sensitive to price hikes and rely on imported goods for variety and affordability. Electronics are another example. Many countries rely on imports for electronics, and when tariffs are imposed on these products, prices increase. A smartphone that once cost $300 might now be priced at $350 or more, leaving consumers with fewer affordable choices. While the domestic electronics industry may benefit from protection against foreign competition, consumers are often left paying the price. Small business owners who rely on imported goods are particularly vulnerable in a trade war. A small retailer who imports clothing, toys, or electronics may find that their cost of goods skyrockets as tariffs increase. In turn, they are forced to either raise prices or absorb the cost themselves, neither of which are good options. Some may even be forced out of business altogether if they can't compete with higher prices, or if their profit margins shrink too much. Exporters are another group that often suffers in a trade war. If a country imposes tariffs on its trading partners, those countries may retaliate with their own tariffs. For instance, a country that exports agricultural goods like wheat or soybeans might find that its primary trading partners impose tariffs on those very products. As a result, the demand for those exports drops and farmers and manufacturers can lose valuable international business. These industries, which rely on access to foreign markets, can be severely impacted by trade restrictions. Trade wars don't only impact specific businesses, they can disrupt entire supply chains. Many industries rely on components from different parts of the world to manufacture their products. A company that assembles electronics, for example, might source some parts from one country and others from a different one. A trade war can cause these supply chains to break down, leading to delays, shortages, and higher production costs. If components become more expensive, so too does the final product. Certain sectors of the economy that rely on raw materials can also see mixed results. Take, for example, the coal industry. If a country imposes tariffs on foreign coal, domestic miners may benefit from higher prices for their product. However, if foreign demand for the country's coal decreases due to retaliatory tariffs from other countries, mining companies may see their export opportunities diminish. At the heart of it all is the delicate balance between domestic protectionism and international cooperation. While trade wars can benefit certain industries and workers, they can also create winners and losers. The industries that are most closely tied to international markets, those dependent on imports and consumers who rely on affordable goods, are often the hardest hit. The complexity of these trade conflicts underscores the difficulty of balancing national interests with the realities of a globally interconnected economy. Trade wars are rarely a zero-sum game. The effects are nuanced and depend on the industries involved, the goods taxed, and the countries impacted. Some will prosper, others will struggle, and the broader consequences ripple throughout the entire economy. Seeking a solution. While trade wars may seem like a quick solution to address economic issues or to protect domestic industries, the reality is far more complex. The imposition of tariffs and trade barriers may offer temporary relief for certain sectors, but it can escalate tensions between countries, disrupt global supply chains, and lead to economic retaliation. In many cases, trade wars only make the situation worse. So what's the solution? Can there be a better way to resolve trade disputes without the need for punitive measures? Trade disputes are not new. They've been around for centuries. But in today's interconnected world, resolving these issues requires more than just imposing tariffs. Dialogue, negotiation, and cooperation are the keys to finding lasting solutions that benefit all parties involved. Diplomats and policymakers play a crucial role in preventing trade wars from escalating by fostering communication and understanding. International trade agreements, when done right, can prevent trade wars by providing clear rules and regulations for trade between nations. These agreements are the product of intense negotiations, where each country brings its own priorities, concerns, and objectives to the table. The goal is not to win or lose, but to find a compromise that leads to mutually beneficial outcomes. Take, for example, the World Trade Organization, WTO, which was established in 1995 as an international body designed to promote and regulate global trade. The WTO provides a platform for countries to resolve trade disputes, negotiate trade agreements, and ensure that trade flows as smoothly and predictably as possible. By participating in these global forums, countries can address trade tensions without resorting to retaliatory tariffs or trade wars. Successful negotiation requires not just diplomacy, but also a clear understanding of the interests of all parties involved. Countries must prioritize the long-term stability of international trade over short-term gains. For example, during a trade negotiation, a country that relies heavily on agricultural exports may seek to protect its farming industry by maintaining lower tariffs on food products. On the other hand, a country that produces advanced technology or industrial goods may push for more favorable terms in those sectors. While trade wars are often viewed through the lens of protectionism, trade agreements can help countries address underlying issues without resorting to punitive tariffs. For instance, trade agreements often involve not only tariff reductions, but also provisions related to intellectual property rights, labor standards, and environmental regulations. By aligning these diverse interests, countries can create a more balanced and sustainable trade environment. For businesses and workers alike, trade agreements can open new markets, reduce the costs of imports, and allow for more competition. A successful trade deal can mean increased exports, higher wages for workers in certain industries, and more affordable goods for consumers. For instance, a trade agreement that reduces tariffs on machinery imports can lower the cost for manufacturers, while also providing them with the tools needed to boost productivity and competitiveness in the global market. While trade agreements can alleviate many of the tensions that lead to trade wars, they are not without their challenges. Trade agreements require careful negotiation and compromise, and not every agreement satisfies all parties equally. Countries may have differing priorities, and trade agreements often require long-term commitments and sacrifices. But the rewards of cooperation, stability, growth, and peace are far more valuable than the short-term protectionism offered by tariffs. Effective trade agreements can create an environment where businesses are incentivized to innovate, expand, and collaborate. When tariffs are reduced or eliminated, it not only fosters competition but also encourages innovation. Companies can now focus on developing new products and services that cater to international markets, creating a ripple effect of growth and job creation across industries. At the end of the day, trade is not a zero-sum game. It's about finding solutions that benefit all parties. By pursuing dialogue and cooperation over confrontation, countries can create a more harmonious and prosperous global economy. It's through collaboration, through forging agreements that consider both national interests and global stability, that trade can be a powerful tool for peace, development, and shared prosperity. In the end, trade wars may create more problems than they solve. But through dialogue, negotiation, and collaboration, countries can achieve outcomes that benefit not only themselves, but the entire global community. By working together, nations can build a more stable, prosperous, and interconnected world. The role of international organizations. In a world of complex trade relationships, disputes, and ever-evolving markets, international organizations play an indispensable role in maintaining order and fairness. One of the most crucial of these organizations is the World Trade Organization, WTO, which serves as a cornerstone of international trade governance. Through the WTO, countries come together to negotiate, resolve disputes, and create the rules that guide global commerce. Narrator. The WTO, established in 1995, is a multilateral institution that regulates global trade by setting the rules and ensuring that they are adhered to by its 164 member countries. The organization's primary goal is to promote free and fair trade by providing a platform where countries can resolve trade disputes, discuss trade policies, and negotiate agreements that ensure trade is conducted transparently and equitably. Negotiation is at the heart of the WTO's role. When countries disagree over trade practices, tariffs, or restrictions, the WTO offers a neutral platform for dialogue. It helps to level the playing field, ensuring that trade disputes are resolved based on agreed-upon international rules rather than through unilateral actions or escalating retaliation. By providing a structured forum for discussions, the WTO reduces the chances of trade wars, which could disrupt the global economy and hurt the citizens of all nations involved. When trade disputes do arise, the WTO's dispute settlement mechanism becomes key. This is where the organization's role is truly tested. The dispute settlement system is designed to address grievances between member countries in a fair, impartial, and transparent manner. It operates through a series of legal processes where trade violations are assessed, and recommendations for trade disputes often revolve around issues such as unfair subsidies, anti-dumping measures, or the improper use of tariffs. Let's say a country imposes tariffs that violate an international trade agreement, or it unfairly subsidizes its industries to undercut foreign competition. In such cases, affected countries can bring their grievances before the WTO's Dispute Resolution Panel. The panel, composed of trade experts, will then examine the evidence, hear arguments, and issue a ruling. Beyond dispute resolution, the WTO also plays a vital role in global trade negotiations. Every few years, the WTO organizes ministerial conferences, bringing together trade ministers and experts from member countries. These conferences provide a critical opportunity for countries to negotiate new trade agreements, update existing ones, and address the most pressing issues in the global marketplace. An important function of the WTO is to act as a facilitator for trade agreements. For instance, during a multilateral trade negotiation, the organization helps countries come together to discuss and reduce tariffs, promote trade liberalization, and align regulations across borders. Agreements facilitated by the WTO not only promote economic growth, but also help level the playing field for developing countries by providing them with better access to international markets. For developing countries, the WTO is a critical avenue for addressing the imbalance in global trade. Often, smaller economies face barriers to entry in major markets, such as high tariffs or restrictive trade practices that limit access to international trade. The WTO's structure allows these nations to have a voice in shaping the rules that govern trade, ensuring that they too can benefit from global trade growth. The WTO aims to provide fairer trading conditions that allow developing countries to expand their markets and integrate more effectively into the global economy. Thanks to WTO agreements, countries in regions like Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America are seeing increased access to markets that were once difficult to penetrate. Farmers in sub-Saharan Africa can now export crops to larger markets, while manufacturers in Southeast Asia benefit from lower tariffs on raw materials, allowing them to produce more competitive goods. For small businesses and entrepreneurs in these regions, the WTO's efforts to reduce trade barriers and level the playing field are transforming their ability to participate in global commerce. The WTO's work in promoting fair trade practices helps foster innovation and creates opportunities that would otherwise be unavailable to these businesses. The WTO also plays an essential role in setting global standards that ensure the safety, quality, and fairness of international trade. For example, it sets standards for product safety, environmental protection, and labor rights to ensure that goods traded across borders meet certain criteria. This helps prevent the spread of harmful products and practices and ensures that trade benefits all people, not just the wealthy and powerful. In today's world, environmental sustainability is a growing concern. As nations trade more goods and services, the environmental impact of global commerce cannot be ignored. The WTO is increasingly working to incorporate sustainable development goals into its trade framework. This includes ensuring that countries engage in environmentally friendly trade practices, such as reducing carbon emissions, promoting renewable resources, and ensuring that trade contributes to the overall well-being of the planet. By balancing trade interests with environmental and social goals, the WTO can help create a more sustainable future. However, this process is not without its challenges. Achieving consensus on the environment, labor practices, and human rights issues can be difficult as countries may have differing views on how best to address these complex issues. Through its work, the WTO ensures that trade remains a force for good in the world, allowing countries to cooperate, resolve disputes, and navigate the intricacies of global commerce. The organization helps to prevent conflict and enables a more prosperous and interconnected world, where trade is governed by clear rules that promote fairness and equality for all nations. The role of international organizations. The World Trade Organization, WTO, plays a crucial role in resolving trade disputes. By offering a platform for negotiation, the WTO works to ensure that international trade is fair and that countries follow the rules. Established in 1995, the WTO is the central organization in global trade, with 164 member countries that represent more than 98% of global trade. But what exactly does the WTO do to keep international trade running smoothly? At the heart of the WTO's role is its responsibility to oversee the implementation of trade agreements that govern how nations engage with each other economically. These agreements are designed to promote free trade by reducing barriers, like tariffs, quotas, and subsidies. But even with these agreements, disputes are inevitable, and the WTO's dispute resolution system is one of its most crucial functions. Disputes are a natural part of international trade. Countries may disagree over the interpretation of trade rules or the imposition of tariffs, which can create tensions and disrupt trade. The WTO provides a structured and impartial process for resolving these disputes. Rather than countries taking unilateral actions or engaging in retaliatory measures, the WTO offers a neutral platform for dialogue and adjudication. When a country believes that another nation is violating trade rules, the dispute resolution mechanism of the WTO becomes activated. This process begins with consultation, where the countries involved try to negotiate a solution directly. However, if consultations fail, the issue is taken to a panel of independent trade experts who examine the facts of the case and issue a ruling. The WTO's dispute settlement process is based on a system of rules. Once a panel is formed, the members of this panel thoroughly assess the evidence, listen to arguments, and consider the broader context of international trade law. The goal is to provide a fair and objective resolution that ensures compliance with global trade standards, while also protecting the interests of the parties involved. After a panel issues its ruling, the countries involved are expected to comply with the decision. If the offending country fails to do so, the WTO allows for retaliatory measures. These retaliations are carefully regulated to ensure they are proportionate to the violation. However, the primary goal is always compliance with the rules, not the escalation of conflict. The dispute resolution system is designed to be both transparent and binding, ensuring that all parties involved uphold their commitments under international law. The WTO is not just a forum for resolving disputes, it is also an active advocate for the smooth functioning of international trade. One of its key roles is to assist developing nations in benefiting from global trade opportunities. Through trade negotiations and capacity-building programs, the WTO works to ensure that developing countries have a fair chance to access international markets and engage in the global economy. Through initiatives like the Doha Development Round, the WTO has focused on ensuring that trade agreements are inclusive, providing developing countries with access to global markets while helping them protect vulnerable sectors, like agriculture. These initiatives aim to reduce trade barriers that disproportionately affect poor nations, ensuring that they too can participate in the growing global economy. Through its technical assistance and trade facilitation programs, the WTO helps developing countries build the necessary infrastructure to participate in international trade. These programs help countries improve their trade capacity, ensure compliance with international regulations, and reduce the administrative costs associated with exporting goods. By empowering these countries, the WTO helps them compete in the global marketplace. However, the WTO's role is not just about resolving disputes and promoting trade. As global challenges like climate change, environmental sustainability, and labor rights become more pressing, the WTO is adapting to the changing landscape. Today, the organization is increasingly focused on how trade can be used to promote sustainability, reduce environmental damage, and improve social welfare. Ensuring that trade benefits people, the environment, and the economy has become an essential part of the WTO's evolving mission. The WTO is engaging with environmental organizations, governments, and businesses to craft trade policies that promote the use of renewable energy, reduce emissions, and protect natural resources. This effort is crucial in a world where the impact of trade on the environment is becoming increasingly significant. By incorporating environmental sustainability into its framework, the WTO is helping create a more responsible, forward-thinking conclusion. Ultimately, fair trade practices are the cornerstone of a healthy global economy. While trade wars may offer short-term solutions, long-term
Welcome to today's English learning session. Whether you're a beginner or looking to improve your skills, you're in the right place.